First contact resolution remains paramount to customers. I want my problem solved right out of the gate. Today, chatbots reduce the friction in the high traffic areas. They ease the load for your support staff, and it allows your talented teams to do what they do best.
VOX Wins. Came back. Well, to reward you, we have Matt Restucci, head of client solutions at J6 Labs, formerly of Vonage, S&P Global, Shutterstock, Groupon, and First Dibs. As illustrious as all that is, I'm a little bit more proud to say he's one of our strategic advisors. And did I hear a single-digit handicap?
Yeah, well, I'm still working on getting it lower, but yes.
Today, we're helping enterprise retail think about road mapping AI into CX orgs while preparing for H1 planning. Matt, what are some common hurdles that CX leaders face when integrating this technology?
Richard, I find that really, compliance, customer trust, it's still significant obstacles. And it's really heightened sensitivity around the AI-driven personalization. Complexity and upskilling teams and coordination across departments creates some adoption friction. And it's increasingly important that all teams are operating at a much higher level today. More transactions are being managed through machine learning and self-serve and automation. The more complex inquiries and the questions have to be fielded with better informed, more higher trained personnel. And managing the AI accuracy and training algorithms to be reliable requires a considerable amount of governance and attention.
Such a resource intensive process to these teams now must be really difficult for a leader to sort of plan what that's going to look like and manage the whole flock across into the future. Who can predict the future with this tech? But if we can, what about the future that you want? You understand the watchouts. What about the favorite opportunities for personalization?
The real-time data, that enables to be able to meet the customer needs dynamically today. And that tailors the experience across many different platforms. Predictive analytics, that's where really helps you to refine the customer journey, and it anticipates the need based on the prior behavior, which is really important. Personalized customer profiles, it's all based on established personas, and that actually contributes to increased satisfaction and conversion when you're engaging with your customers.
Then where can we start today, both to boost productivity of internal teams and have better external interfaces for your customers?
Richard, internally, it starts with automation and data management, because what that does, it actually frees the teams to focus on the high value work. Again, it's the more complex challenges, where it's generating insights, you're building less time on cleaning and maintaining, and you need that in order to provide just a better experience overall. For customer facing, it's a little different. Today, chatbots reduce the friction in the high traffic areas. They ease the load for your support staff, and it allows your talented teams to do what they do best, solve difficult problems, focusing on the customer, all while reducing that time to resolution. The knowledge base that support teams leverage today will continue to get smarter, prioritizing responses to what's important to the customers while having the best success rate. First contact resolution remains paramount to customers. I want my problem solved right out of the gate, and I want it solved immediately and not to be transferred around somewhere else to another department. So that's really important.
And that's an underappreciated value of conversational AI for support teams. Replacement isn't the value proposition as much as enablement of and supercharging of human teams in order to win those customers. Now, Avedis and I would know about this. Shout out to our Snaps family. Come on the show. But to that point, I think leaders are learning now how to win buy-in and align stakeholders for this new technology. What best practices do you have for successful implementation?
Richard, this really isn't any new news for a lot of leaders out there. It's pretty basic, but sometimes it's overlooked. cross functional training, stakeholder meetings ensure that everyone understands the AI goals and the impact. And really, it comes down to demonstrating the clear ROI from the outset, because that builds the trust and the support. And more importantly, that helps build that trust, especially from the finance teams. That's very important. Leveraging this phased approach for both implementation and upskilling really smooths that transition, because it's an evolutionary type process. It takes time, and you really have to win people over the long haul. At the end of the day, customer care continues to be among the biggest contributor for consumers in helping to shape their opinion of the brand. It can't be shortchanged. So you really have to continue to focus on enhancing that in every possible way.
Yeah, I think one of the things I've enjoyed learning, especially from you, is how much customer care really sits in the epicenter and is helping to almost triage everything that comes down the line, help send that feedback loop information to inform marketing and product roadmaps. And yeah, I think would it be reasonable to say that any leader that gets to this point of influence to be that decision maker probably has these innate traits already? So maybe I shouldn't be I don't know, overzealous and try to assume that it creates these all new skill sets we have to learn. The technology is still going to work for us and how we best run these teams.
Absolutely. There's no question about it. And I do think that employee engagement is highly underrated today. And I do think that that's something that we can never forget about. You must continue to engage your employees at every single level. Really reach out to them on a regular basis. You need to get their input on so many different levels. Inclusion, that goes without saying. Everybody needs to be a part of the contribution to what's happening. It's not just an IT or a tech implementation and it just comes down from the top. It's got to come from the bottom up, and they have to have their opinion in that. The in-person hybrid model, how do we better engage with work from home? That's something that remains constant ever since the pandemic. And I think that companies investing in the employee experience will really start to see stronger customer loyalty and retention. That goes without saying.
Oh, hey, our first time viewers have stuck around. Well, so much for social media burning our attention spans. I'm proud of us. I think we're owed a little bit of some hot takes, but Matt, it almost sounds like you're already touching on something that qualifies here, because while our attention is on AI and how we're going to integrate this new technology and some watch outs when we bring it into our organization, I think you're touching on something really important, that let's not have too much attention on AI, and the underrated factor is going to be that human experience.
From my own personal experience, I will tell you, you can never overlook the employee experience. And it's something that I've been continually working on over my career. But I will tell you this always, keeping them engaged, getting their input. I've learned more from my direct reports than I have learned from those that I reported to. And that is something that I sincerely, express, because I've been so thankful for some of the smartest, most engaged and committed people that I've worked with.
I do hope that anyone watching this leaves with some optimism, seeing that there are leaders who know the value of this technology is to enhance that human experience. I think that's a culture we've experienced directly by having your guidance, Matt. But now let's look nearer from the horizon with H1 planning just around the corner. When it comes to breaking down silos, how should leaders approach buy in from different departments?
I'm telling you, it's a phased approach, Richard. And finance first, then IT and legal. And what you're doing is setting a real strong foundation for the operations teams. We've already mentioned trust, but establishing a unified business goals across those teams aligns them from the start and helps create accountability across all the departments. All roads lead to creating the best possible customer experience. It starts and ends with the customer. You'll be able to continue to convince finance when you start showing and demonstrating how valuable it is to the bottom line.
That's a lot of languages that you have to speak. I mean, I think in my most ambitious versions of my LinkedIn profile, I can consider myself a little bit of a generalist. But jokes aside, you are talking about winning over disparate organizations. Thankfully, I think it's safe to say that implementations will unify the customer experience across these digital channels, and I think even increasingly so as we take brick and mortar use cases and port them over to digital. But even with that helpfulness that we're all basically going to be looking at the same problems, how do you speak the same language as finance, then switch to tech, back over to legal, etc.?
Well, over the years, I've learned its data driven outcomes resonate best with the counterparties by highlighting impacts on conversion and LTV gains. Finance will always be interested in the return on investment. You always need to build the sound business case when it involves enhancing the customer experience, and the numbers will speak for themselves. Then it's about real world success stories and case studies. Make all these abstract benefits very tangible for finance. Building stronger business cases, and by the way, your vendors will help here because I've actually leaned on many vendors and suppliers before to help me build a business case, and it's worked. Progress updates helps maintain the momentum and keep all the parties engaged. You need to demonstrate how the improvements that you're making, what type of impacts they're having on the customer experience. And by the way, how that translates into the almighty dollar. In the end, hate to use this phrase over and over, you got to show them the money. But for finance, that's what it's going to take. And they need to see the hard dollars and how it translates into better retention, better share of wallet. It all continues to really build on itself.
Yeah, putting you in a position where, on one hand, sort of the output language you're speaking to the customer is that warm feeling, that association, and what adherence with the brand implies about them and themselves, and that lifestyle. But before that, it's all very digital, so it takes a very sort of adaptable leader to manage both. What trends are you observing today?
Trends are showing a move toward a more omni-channel, integrated, buy online, pick up in store, curbside pickup, seamless returns across all of the digital platforms. We already mentioned AI driven solutions that reduces cart abandonment and personalizes the product recommendations. That goes without saying. More companies are leveraging data to adjust inventory strategies dynamically based on the customer behaviors. Obviously, that helps in real time as well.
More data, talking to finance, more numbers. I don't know how you manage to stay such a grounded and empathetic human being, but kudos to you for doing so. Hey, I could talk about the future all day, but I promised Avedis I'd cap my self-indulgence on this thing. So let's hear some war stories where you put out a fire or built something uncommonly difficult. Tell us about a time your team faced adversity and succeeded.
So, Richard, I will tell you a story. We were managing all of the customer service departments for a company. We managed all of the various channels. However, we had this situation where everybody was expected to manage across the different channels. So, in other words, it was a shared responsibility. The biggest challenge, of course, we ran into was lack of specialization, lack of focus. It wasn't well integrated, and it created a lot of challenges for us. It really did. So, we moved shortly after I got there. We began the plan to develop the specialization. At first, it was challenging because some folks really didn't want to work in just one specific channel. They liked the idea of being the jack of all trades. I could manage chat, I could do phone, I could handle the email. And guess what? It really wasn't efficient. And once we were able to start migrating people over to the channel that they excelled the most at and they did the best, we found we were far more efficient. They were much more effective in addressing customers' questions and getting the answers to them quickly. In all, it just became a far more efficient model. It sounds pretty simple. Of course, you're going to have specialization. Of course, you're going to have these types of customer service reps that have to manage a particular channel. But some companies like the idea of having them, manage all of the channels, and they feel like it's more efficient when it really isn't. We improved our efficiencies probably by about 15 to 20%. Not only that, our CSAT jumped up by a few percentage points. So it was a win-win for everybody. And in the end, our people really loved it because they realized that what they were very good at.
As someone who is certainly wearing a lot of hats now at VOX Wins, but I think my experience is really focused in people, teams, traditional HR functions, recruiting, and comms. I think I identify a little bit of self actualization in that. Give people, put them in an environment where they're just going to succeed and really do well every single day, build that confidence, find that fit for them. That sounds wonderful. Really, like I don't want to get too sentimental over here because we are talking about retail in the craziness of H2, but I think to help people along that journey and just change their day to day where they're having great interactions with customers, they're succeeding, they're solving problems for people, like that's a great boost and uplift to the spirits. So yeah, that touches me. I'm a soft, sensitive guy, so you're gonna pull those heartstrings on me pretty easily. Actually, I think to that point, there's a lot of rising leaders who are watching the show. Consider the senior managers out there are going to become the next class of VPs. What insights would you share with them?
Again, I think I always fall back on, I would say, listen to your people, because don't underestimate your teams probably have the best insight in terms of how you can solve problems. When I typically fell back and relied on spending more time with the teams to ask them how they would solve some of the solutions, I was always overwhelmed by some of the insights that they had. And candidly, we implemented a number of their points that they provided in feedback. Candidly, they actually made them more successful because it came from their ideas. Don't be afraid to seek advice from your teams. Don't be afraid to reach out for help. It's funny because I there's a lot of people, I don't know what it is, but they've got this thing where they refuse to stop and ask for directions. Maybe that was bigger before we all had GPS in our phones, that took us everywhere. But don't be afraid to ask for help. It's a pretty mature thing to do. It means that you're willing and open to try something new. And you absolutely respect the feedback and the knowledge that some other people, not even in your department, but across the company, that can provide you with some really good feedback, sometimes more candid feedback than you may want. But don't be afraid to ask for help. Everything else, you know what you need to do. We all know what the mission is. We all know what we have to provide for the customer. But when you do run into those challenging situations, I think it's really helped me to reach out to the right people, both the executives as well as my peers, as well as folks who've reported to me. Don't be afraid to ask for help.
Well, I certainly don't have any qualms about reaching out for help. I mean, Matt, your guidance and your light has touched just about every corner of the young company that we are building. So thank you for sharing those insights. And I will completely vouch for every single one that you've said, as I've been able to see your leadership and benefit from that. To our audience, thank you for joining us. We'll be back next week as we uncover more of the evolving retail landscape and understand the consensus voice of its leaders, because above all else, VOX wins.